So let's talk about obesity and exercise today. So basically what I want to show you today is how exercise influences you being obese. We know that approximately half of the US population will be obese by the year of 2035. So in 9 years, half of the US population will be obese. And while there is lots of noise about obesity, we all need to recognize that obesity is actually a very complex condition. And while through social media and in total it's portrayed as an aesthetic problem and you not feeling comfortable in your own body, I need you to remember that it actually puts you at a higher risk of developing other diseases and therefore shortening your lifespan and health span as well. Those diseases include type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, and of course cardiovascular diseases. So while you're obese, there are processes that are happening on a cellular level that you might not feel, like a toothache or a knee pain, but it's still happening. Obesity changes what happens on a cellular level in your white adipose tissue, in your brown adipose tissue, in your liver, and on your skeletal muscles as well. So this is really important to remember. Obesity puts you at increased risk for diabetes, fatty liver, and also cardiovascular risk. And then if you look at your cells and think of your cells, it also changes what happens in your brown, white adipose tissue, in your liver, and also in your skeletal muscles. And if you exercise, what exercise does, it actually increases the glucose metabolism and increases the lipids metabolism. And more importantly, which is the third factor, which is not widely spoken about, everyone talks about glucose, everyone talks about lipids, but what about inflammation? We now know that being obese puts you in a pro-inflammatory state, especially in those tissues. So adipose tissue, brown and white, liver, and also skeletal muscle. And we know that when you exercise, it actually reduces the inflammation in those tissues. So this is really interesting and really important to remember. So exercise increases the glucose metabolism, lipids metabolism, but also reduces the pro-inflammatory state that is caused by you being fat in those tissues. It is a very complex issue, but this is the one takeaway I want you to remember. When you exercise, you activate your glucose metabolism, you activate your lipid metabolism, but you also downregulate the inflammatory pathways that are happening in your liver, in your skeletal muscle, and also in your adipose tissue, which is very important. Now, you might have been put on Monjaro, Wegovy, or Ozempic by your doctor to treat your obesity, to treat your glucose levels, and you might be asking yourself, so how does that relate to what you're talking about right now? And here's the thing I have for you. There has been a study performed of patients on Monjaro who have been on Monjaro for 6 weeks, starting with a 2.5, which is the lower dose of 5 milligrams of Monjaro weekly, and combine that with 3 sessions per week of resistance and aerobic exercise. So over 6 weeks, and they had Monjaro either 2.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams, and 3 times per week they had to exercise with combination of aerobic and resistant training. And what the study has found is that this intervention reduced the body weight, reduced the waist circumference, fat mass, waist to hip ratio. But the interesting thing that they observed is that exercise actually did not have any additive effect on fasting glucose or triglyceride levels. So when it comes to your lipid levels and glucose levels, it didn't really matter whether you were just on the drug or you were on the drug and you were exercising 3 times a week. So that's a really interesting finding. And one more question that I get asked in the clinic very frequently is, can exercise actually override the genetic causes of obesity? So we now know that genetic and environmental factors contribute to obesity. And of course, the diet and sedentary lifestyle are the main problems. And exercise, of course, can combat those. But while lifestyle factors are important contributors, we now know that genetic factors play also a significant role. And those genetic factors are mainly changes in the leptin and melanocortin pathways. And we know that it affects about 5% of the population with early onset obesity. So it's people who are obese very early in their life. 5% of them are likely to have a genetical change in the leptin or melanocortin pathway. What I'm trying to say here is that vast majority of people have lifestyle problems. So the main driver to obesity is environmental factors. So what do we have for information? What data do we have regarding this up to date? So we now know that exercise can potentially affect genetical obesity, but of course there are limitations to it, because why? Exercise basically will not change your gene expression. What we now believe is that exercise can modify the epigenetic alteration that impact gene expression that are related to the whole body metabolic function, which is a really interesting topic. But I need you to understand from here that while genetics play a role, environmental factors are still number one. And even if your obesity might have genetical cause, the data suggest that exercise has positive effect on that cause of obesity as well. So it's really important to exercise. Exercise induces positive metabolic changes in your adipose tissue, liver and skeletal muscle. That's the reduction of inflammation that we spoke about. It leads to increased endocrine activity and mitochondrial activity. But here's the other thing that I want to touch on, and this might really shock you. I want to talk about the Ponza constrained energy expenditure hypothesis. It's actually really well researched, and it suggests that physical activity actually minimally affects daily caloric burn. Put it simple, it really doesn't matter how much you exercise, it won't affect your daily caloric burn significantly. And this hypothesis presumes that with no exercise activity thermogenesis, which is NEAT, and dietary patterns play here the key roles rather than exercise. So basically, NEAT is what you burn when you don't exercise. No exercise activity thermogenesis, the abbreviation is NEAT, and also the dietary pattern play a key role rather than exercise. And here's the thing, NEAT decreases, and that's been proven, with extensive exercise. So your no exercise activity thermogenesis goes down when you exercise a lot, unless a dietary compensation occurs. And greater efficiency in physical activity might actually reduce total energy expenditure even further. So exercise improves dramatically your health because it increases your glucose metabolism, it increases your lipid metabolism, and decreases the inflammatory states in those tissues as discussed. But we think that the body anyhow tightly regulates how many calories it's willing to spend. So it always remains the combination of your diet, your exercise, your lifestyle, and your genetics. It's very complex, but bottom line is exercise has got positive effect on your overall health when you're obese. Tune in for more information.